Marcus Blackwood had everything money could buy, but when he saw the little girl walking barefoot through the cemetery with wildflowers in her tiny hands, whispering to a weathered headstone, something inside his billionaire heart shattered completely. What she told him next about her mother would change both their lives forever. But first, she had to trust the stranger who couldn't stop his own tears from falling. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button for more real, emotional, life-changing stories like this, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The morning sun cast long shadows across Riverside Cemetery as Marcus Blackwood completed his 7th mile, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool October air. His custom running shoes pounded against the worn asphalt path that wound through the oldest section of the cemetery, where weathered headstones tilted at awkward angles and weeds grew between forgotten graves. This route had become his Sunday ritual, a way to escape the suffocating weight of board meetings, acquisition deals, and the endless stream of people who wanted something from him. Marcus had chosen this path deliberately because it was deserted, because normal people didn't jog through cemeteries at 7 in the morning, because here he could run without bodyguards trailing behind him or paparazzi lurking in bushes, hoping to catch the reclusive tech mogul in an unguarded moment. Here, surrounded by the silence of the dead, he could almost forget that he was worth $37 billion and that his latest acquisition had put 12,000 people out of work. But this Sunday morning was different. As he rounded the bend near the old oak tree, whose branches drooped low enough to brush his shoulders, Marcus noticed something that made him slow his pace. A small figure was moving between the headstones, picking flowers from the wild patches that grew untended along the cemetery's edges. At first glance, he assumed it was a maintenance worker, but as he drew closer, he realized it was a child. The girl couldn't have been more than 8 years old, with tangled auburn hair that caught the morning light, and a dress that might have been white once, but was now stained with grass and dirt. Her feet were bare, and Marcus winced as he watched her step carefully around thorns and broken glass scattered on the ground. She moved with the focused determination of someone much older, selecting certain flowers while leaving others untouched, creating a small bouquet in her cupped hands. Marcus had trained himself to notice details. It was what made him successful in business, and he noticed everything about this strange scene. The girl's dress was too big for her small frame, hanging loose around her shoulders and dragging slightly on the ground. Her arms were thin, almost frail, but she moved with purpose and grace. Most striking of all were her eyes, which held a sadness that seemed too deep for someone so young. For 3 consecutive Sundays, Marcus observed this ritual from a distance. Each time, the girl would arrive at the cemetery just as the sun was rising, always barefoot, always in the same oversized dress. She would spend nearly an hour collecting wildflowers, dandelions, Queen Anne's lace, black-eyed Susans, whatever was blooming in the cemetery's forgotten corners. Then she would walk to the same weathered headstone in the older section and kneel beside it, arranging the flowers carefully before sitting cross-legged in the grass. Marcus found himself adjusting his running schedule to coincide with her visits. He told himself it was mere curiosity, but deep down, he recognized something familiar in the girl's solitary vigil. The way she sat so still beside that grave, the way she seemed to be carrying on a conversation with someone who couldn't answer back. It reminded him of his own childhood visits to his mother's grave, back when he was young enough to believe that talking to headstones might somehow bridge the gap between the living and the dead. On the 4th Sunday, Marcus made a decision that would change both their lives forever. Instead of running past at his usual distance, he slowed to a walk and approached the girl where she knelt beside the grave. She looked up at him with those impossibly sad eyes, and for a moment neither of them spoke. "Hello," Marcus said softly, suddenly aware that his expensive running gear and obvious wealth might seem intimidating to a child who clearly had so little. He kept his distance, not wanting to frighten her. The girl studied him for a long moment before responding. "Are you visiting someone too?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Not today," he said. "I was just running by, and I noticed you here. I've seen you before, actually, every Sunday." She nodded, as if this made perfect sense. "I come every Sunday. Mom always said consistency matters." "Your mom?" Marcus asked gently, gesturing toward the headstone. The girl's hand traced the carved letters on the weathered granite. Sarah Catherine Rodriguez. She died when I was 6. That was 2 years ago. Marcus felt his heart clench. 2 years of Sunday visits. This child had been faithfully tending to her mother's grave for 2 years. He knelt down to her level, ignoring the dampness of the grass seeping through his expensive running shorts. "The flowers are beautiful," he said, admiring the carefully arranged bouquet she had placed against the headstone. "Did your mom like flowers?" The girl's face lit up for the first time since he had approached her. She loved them. She had a little garden behind our old house, nothing fancy, just whatever would grow in the clay soil. Marigolds and petunias mostly, but she said they were the most beautiful flowers in the world, because she grew them with love. The girl's smile faded slightly. "We had to move after she died. Uncle Ray, he's my guardian now. He doesn't like gardens. Says they're a waste of time and money." Marcus felt a familiar anger building in his chest, the same protective instinct that had driven him to succeed in business, to accumulate wealth and power as shields against the cruelties of the world. But this anger was different, cleaner somehow, focused not on acquisition, but on protection. "What's your name?" he asked. Isabella Rodriguez, but everyone calls me Izzy." "It's nice to meet you, Izzy. I'm Marcus." He didn't give his last name, didn't want to complicate this moment with explanations of who he was or what he represented in the world beyond this quiet cemetery. "Why do you run here?" Izzy asked, surprising him with her directness. "Most people think cemeteries are creepy." Marcus considered the question seriously. "I suppose I find them peaceful. It's one of the few places where I can think clearly." Izzy nodded sagely. "Mom always said that quiet places help us hear our hearts better. That's why I like coming here. I can tell her about school, and about Uncle Ray, and about the mean kids who make fun of my shoes." She looked down at her bare feet self-consciously. "Where are your shoes?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "They got too small. Uncle Ray says he'll get me new ones when he gets paid next month. But he always says that." Izzy's voice held no accusation, just the resigned acceptance of a child who had learned not to expect too much from the adults in her life. Marcus felt his hands clench into fists. He had built his fortune by identifying problems and solving them with ruthless efficiency. But this problem felt too big, too complex, too personal. How do you fix a broken system that allows children to walk barefoot through cemeteries because their guardians can't or won't provide basic necessities? "Tell me about your uncle," Marcus said carefully. Izzy's expression grew guarded. "He's not bad," she said quickly, as if defending him from an accusation Marcus hadn't made. "He just gets tired sometimes. He works at the auto shop during the day and drives for a rideshare company at night. He says taking care of me is expensive, and he never asked for the responsibility." The words hit Marcus like physical blows. He recognized the language of a child who had been made to feel like a burden, who had internalized the idea that her very existence was an imposition on the adults around her. "Your mother didn't choose to leave you," Marcus said firmly. "And you're not responsible for the adults who are supposed to take care of you." Izzy looked at him with surprise, as if no one had ever spoken to her with such certainty about her worth. "Mom used to say I was her greatest blessing. She said even when things were hard, just looking at me made everything better." "Smart woman," Marcus said, and he meant it. "What else did she tell you?" Izzy's face transformed as she began to share memories of her mother. She told Marcus about Saturday morning pancakes shaped like animals, about bedtime stories that always ended with the princess saving herself, about rainy day art projects using whatever materials they could find around their small apartment. She described a woman who had worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat, but had never been too tired to read one more story or kiss one more scraped knee. "She was going to be a teacher," Izzy said, her voice growing soft with reverence. "She was taking classes at the community college at night, studying elementary education. She said she wanted to help kids like me, kids who didn't have much but had big dreams anyway." Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. What happened to her? Cancer. It started in her lungs and spread really fast. She fought it for 8 months. But the doctors said there wasn't anything else they could do. Uncle Ray says she should have fought harder, but I think she fought as hard as she could. She just ran out of strength. The simple acceptance in Izzy's voice broke something inside Marcus. Here was a child who had already learned more about loss and resilience than most adults would ever understand, and she was facing it with a grace that humbled him completely. "She sounds like an amazing person," Marcus said. She was. She always said that when life gets hard, you just have to find something beautiful to focus on. That's why I'd bring her flowers every Sunday. She always said flowers make hard days better. Marcus felt his carefully constructed emotional walls crumbling. The words hit him with unexpected force, carrying him back to his own childhood, to his own mother's death when he was 12 years old. He remembered the overwhelming grief, the way it had felt like drowning in an ocean of loss. He remembered his father's inability to cope, the way the man had retreated into work and alcohol and left Marcus to navigate his grief alone. "My mother died when I was young too," Marcus found himself saying. "I was 12. Izzy's eyes widened with understanding. "Did you visit her grave?" "For a while, but then we moved away, and I never went back. Do you miss her?" The question was so simple, so direct, that Marcus felt his throat close up. When was the last time anyone had asked him about his mother? When was the last time he had allowed himself to think about her, beyond the abstract knowledge that her death had shaped his drive to succeed? "Every day," he whispered. Izzy reached out and touched his hand with her small, dirty fingers. "It's okay to cry. Mom always said tears are just love with nowhere to go." Marcus felt the dam burst. 31 years of suppressed grief came pouring out in the form of tears he hadn't allowed himself to shed since he was 12 years old. He wept for his mother, for the relationship they never got to have, for the grandmother she would never be to children he had never bothered to have. He wept for Izzy, this brave little girl who brought flowers to her mother's grave every Sunday because it was the only way she knew how to keep love alive. He wept for all the children in the world who were forced to grow up too fast, to carry burdens too heavy for their small shoulders. Izzy sat quietly beside him, her hand still resting on his, offering the kind of comfort that could only come from someone who truly understood loss. When his tears finally subsided, she offered him a wilted dandelion from her bouquet. "For your mom," she said simply. Marcus accepted the flower with shaking hands. "Thank you." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, two people bound together by grief and the strange alchemy of shared understanding. Finally, Marcus looked at the headstone more carefully, reading the inscription beneath Sarah Catherine Rodriguez's name and dates. "Beloved mother and daughter, she made the world brighter just by being in it. Uncle Ray let me choose what to put on the stone," Izzy said proudly. "He said it was too expensive to put a lot of words, but I wanted people to know she was special." Marcus made a mental note to himself. Sarah Catherine Rodriguez deserved a better memorial, and he was going to make sure she got one. "Izzy, can I ask you something?" Marcus said carefully. "Are you happy living with your uncle?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. She fidgeted with the hem of her dress, avoiding his eyes. "He's not mean or anything," she said finally. He doesn't really know what to do with me. I think he wishes I could take care of myself." "How old are you, Izzy?" 8. "I'll be 9 in December." 8 years old, and already trying to take care of herself. Marcus felt his protective instincts surge again. "What about school? Do you like your teachers?" Izzy's face brightened slightly. "Mrs. Patterson is really nice. She lets me help clean the classroom after school, and sometimes she gives me books to take home. She says I'm a good reader." "What do you like to read?" "Everything. Stories about kids who go on adventures, books about animals, anything really. Mom taught me to read when I was 4, and she always said reading was like having a superpower because it meant you could learn Gerber. About anything you wanted." Marcus smiled at this. "Your mom was right. What do you want to learn about?" "I want to be a teacher, like Mom was going to be. I want to help other kids learn to read and feel good about themselves. Mrs. Patterson says I'm smart enough to go to college someday if I work hard." "I'm sure you are." "Smart enough," Marcus said. "What does your uncle think about you wanting to be a teacher?" Izzy's expression dimmed. He says I shouldn't get my hopes up. He says college is for rich kids, not kids like me. He says I should focus on learning a trade or something practical. Marcus felt his anger flare again. Here was a child with dreams and potential, and the adults in her life were already trying to limit her possibilities. He thought about his own childhood, about the teachers who had recognized his potential and pushed him to excel despite his circumstances. Every child deserved that kind of advocacy. Izzy, I want you to know something, Marcus said, turning to face her fully. Your dreams are not too big. You are not too poor or too young or too anything to become whatever you want to become. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. She looked at him with wonder, as if he had just revealed a secret truth. Really? Really? Smart, determined kids like you can accomplish anything they set their minds to. It might take longer, it might be harder, but it's absolutely possible. Marcus glanced at his watch and realized he had been sitting in the cemetery for over an hour. His driver would be wondering where he was, and he had a conference call with his Tokyo office in 30 minutes. But for the first time in his adult life, business didn't feel like the most important thing in the world. I have to go, he said reluctantly. But, can I ask you something? Would it be okay if I came back next Sunday? I'd like to visit with you and your mom again. Izzy's face lit up with joy. You'd want to come back? Very much. Mom would like that. She always said the best people are the ones who understand that everyone has a story worth hearing. As Marcus jogged back to where his driver waited, his mind was racing with possibilities. He had built his fortune by identifying opportunities that others missed, by seeing potential where others saw problems. But this was different from any business deal he had ever contemplated. This was personal. That afternoon, Marcus canceled his remaining meetings and made a series of phone calls. The first was to his head of security, instructing him to conduct a discreet background check on Raymond Rodriguez and his living situation with his niece. The second was to his personal attorney, asking about the legal processes involved in child welfare cases. The third was to his assistant, asking her to research the best private schools in the area and their scholarship programs. By evening, Marcus had a complete picture of Izzy's situation, and it was worse than he had imagined. Raymond Rodriguez was deeply in debt, behind on rent, and working multiple jobs just to keep them afloat. The apartment they shared was in a building that had been cited for numerous safety violations. Raymond had no criminal record, but he also had no experience raising children and was clearly overwhelmed by the responsibility. More troubling were the reports from Izzy's school. While their teachers consistently praised her intelligence and behavior, they had noted that she often came to school hungry and that her clothes were frequently unwashed. She had missed several days of school in recent months, and when questioned, she had explained that she was helping her uncle with various tasks. Marcus stared at the reports spread across his desk and felt a familiar sense of determination settle over him. He had spent his entire adult life solving complex problems, marshaling resources, and creating solutions where none had existed before. This problem was no different, except that the stakes were infinitely higher. The following Sunday, Marcus arrived at the cemetery early. He brought with him a small cooler filled with sandwiches, fruit, and bottled water, along with a new pair of sneakers in what he hoped was Izzy's size. He had agonized over the shoes, not wanting to offend her or make her feel like charity case, but ultimately deciding that her safety was more important than his concerns about propriety. Izzy arrived at her usual time, and her face lit up when she saw Marcus sitting beside her mother's grave. "You came back." "I told you I would," Marcus said, smiling at her enthusiasm. "I brought some snacks, if you're hungry." Izzy's eyes widened at the sight of the food. "Are you sure? Uncle Ray says I shouldn't take things from strangers." "Your uncle is right to be cautious," Marcus said. "But we're not strangers anymore, are we? We're friends who understand each other." Izzy considered this logic and nodded solemnly. Friends can share food. As they ate together beside Sarah's grave, Marcus learned more about Izzy's daily life. She described walking 22 blocks to school each morning because the bus stop was too far from their apartment. She talked about helping Yao, her uncle, with laundry and cleaning because he was always too tired when he got home from work. She mentioned offhandedly that they had been eating a lot of peanut butter sandwiches lately, because other food was too expensive. Each detail felt like a small knife in Marcus's chest. This child was 8 years old, and already functioning as a caretaker for her adult guardian, sacrificing her own childhood to help him manage responsibilities he was clearly unequipped to handle. "Izzy," Marcus said carefully, "what would you say if I told you I might be able to help make things easier for you and your uncle?" She looked at him with curious eyes. "What kind of help?" "Well, I know some people who are very good at fixing problems. They could help make sure your apartment is safe and comfortable, and maybe help your uncle with some of his worries about money." Izzy frowned. "Why would you want to help us? We're not your family." The question caught Marcus off guard. Why did he want to help them? Was it guilt over his own privileged position? Was it some kind of savior complex? Or was it something simpler and more profound? The recognition that this child represented everything good and pure in the world, and that protecting her was somehow essential to protecting hope itself. "Sometimes," Marcus said slowly, "we meet people who touch our hearts in ways we don't expect. Your courage and kindness, the way you honor your mother's memory, the way you've stayed hopeful despite everything you've been through. It reminds me of the best parts of humanity. I have resources that could make your life better, and it would be wrong of me not to use them." Izzy studied his face intently. "Mom always said that when someone offers to help, you should ask yourself if they want something in return. What do you want from us?" Marcus felt his heart clench at the wisdom in her question. How many adults had disappointed this child for her to have developed such sophisticated defenses at 8 years old? "I don't want anything from you," Marcus said honestly, "but I'll tell you what I hope for. I hope that someday, when you're grown up and successful, you'll remember that someone believed in you when you were 8 years old. And maybe you'll use that memory to help another child who needs someone to believe in them." Izzy's expression softened. "Like paying it forward?" "Exactly like paying it forward." She was quiet for a long moment, and Marcus could almost see her processing this concept. Finally, she looked up at him with those impossibly mature eyes. "I think Mom would like you," she said. "She always said the measure of a person isn't how much they have, but how much they're willing to give." That afternoon, Marcus made more phone calls. He contacted his real estate team and instructed them to find a suitable house for rent in a good school district, something with a yard where a little girl could plant flowers. He called his legal team and asked them to research the possibility of setting up a trust fund for Izzy's education. He reached out to his charitable foundation and asked them to explore scholarship programs for gifted children from low-income families. But most importantly, he called a family social worker he had met at a charity event, someone who specialized in helping families navigate difficult transitions. Marcus knew that any significant change in Izzy's living situation would need to be handled carefully, with proper oversight and support systems in place. Over the following weeks, Marcus continued his Sunday visits to the cemetery. Each week, he learned more about Izzy's resilience and wisdom. She told him about her dreams of becoming a teacher, about the books she loved to read, about the garden she wanted to plant someday. She also revealed more about her current struggles, the hunger she tried to hide, the worry about her uncle's increasing stress, the fear that she was becoming too much of a burden. Meanwhile, Marcus's team worked behind the scenes to address the practical challenges. They found a modest but comfortable 3-bedroom house in a good neighborhood, with a backyard perfect for gardening. They negotiated with the landlord to provide a long-term lease at below-market rates, funded by an anonymous benefactor. They researched the local elementary school and confirmed that it had excellent programs for gifted students. The most delicate part of the process was approaching B. Raymond Rodriguez. Marcus knew that any offer of help had to be presented in a way that preserved the man's dignity and autonomy. He couldn't simply swoop in with his wealth and take over their lives, no matter how much he wanted to fix everything immediately. The opportunity came during Marcus's 5th Sunday visit to the cemetery. As he and Izzy sat sharing fruit and talking about her mother's favorite books, Raymond Rodriguez appeared at the cemetery gate. Marcus recognized him immediately from the photos in the background check, a thin man in his early 30s with tired eyes and calloused hands. "Izzy," Raymond called out, his voice tight with worry. "What are you doing? Who is this man?" Izzy jumped up and ran to her uncle. Uncle Ray, this is my friend Marcus. He comes to visit Mom with me on Sundays. He's really nice. Raymond looked at Marcus with suspicion and protective anger. I told you not to talk to strangers, Izzy. You can't just trust everyone who seems friendly. Marcus stood slowly, keeping his hands visible and his posture non-threatening. Mr. Rodriguez, I completely understand your concern. I would feel the same way if I were in your position. My name is Marcus Blackwood, and I've been visiting with Izzy for a few weeks now. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. Raymond's eyes narrowed at the mention of Marcus's name. Even people who didn't follow business news knew the name Blackwood Industries. The billionaire? What are you doing talking to my niece? I jog through the cemetery every Sunday morning, and I noticed Izzy bringing flowers to her mother's grave. We started talking, and I've been impressed by her intelligence and character. She's a remarkable young lady. What do you want? Raymond asked bluntly. Marcus appreciated the direct question. I'd like to help, if you'll let me. I know you're working hard to provide for Izzy, and I have resources that could make things easier for both of you. Raymond's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. We don't need charity. I'm doing fine taking care of her. I'm sure you are, Marcus said calmly. But doing fine and having help aren't mutually exclusive. You're working multiple jobs, you're stressed about money, and Izzy is walking to school barefoot because she's outgrown her shoes. Those aren't failings on your part. They're just circumstances that could be improved. What kind of help? Raymond asked suspiciously. Marcus chose his words carefully. I'd like to offer you a position managing properties for one of my real estate companies. It would pay significantly more than what you're making now, with regular hours and good benefits. The position comes with a company house, a nice place with a yard where Izzy could play safely. Raymond stared at him. Why would you do that? Because I believe in investing in good people. You've been taking care of Izzy for 2 years, working multiple jobs to keep her fed and housed. That kind of dedication and work ethic is exactly what I look for in employees. And what's the catch? Raymond asked. No catch. Just the expectation that you'll do the job well, and that Izzy will continue to receive the care and support she needs to thrive. Raymond looked at Izzy, who was watching the conversation with wide eyes. Marcus could see the internal struggle playing out on the man's face, pride warring with practicality, suspicion fighting with hope. Can I think about it? Raymond asked finally. Of course. Take all the time you need. But Mr. Rodriguez, I want you to know that this offer comes with no strings attached. If you decide it's not right for you, there will be no consequences. I'll simply continue to be Izzy's friend, an occasional Sunday visitor. Over the next week, Marcus's social worker contact reached out to Raymond directly, offering to serve as a neutral third party in evaluating the offer. She conducted a thorough assessment of the proposed arrangement, confirming that it was legitimate and in Izzy's best interests. The following Sunday, Raymond returned to the cemetery with his decision. I've talked to the social worker, and I've thought about it all week, he said. I want to accept your offer, but I have conditions. I'm listening, Marcus said. I pay my own way as much as possible. I don't want handouts. I want to earn what we receive. And I want regular check-ins with the social worker to make sure everything stays above board. If at any point this arrangement isn't working for Izzy, I want the right to walk away without penalty. Marcus extended his hand. Deal. The transition took several weeks to arrange properly. Marcus's team worked with local authorities to ensure that all legal requirements were met and that appropriate oversight was in place. The house was prepared and furnished simply but comfortably, with special attention paid to creating a bedroom that would make an 8-year-old girl feel safe and valued. The day of the move, Marcus arrived to help with the transition. He found Izzy standing in the middle of her new bedroom, spinning slowly with her arms outstretched. It's so big, she said wonderingly. And there are windows on 2 walls, so I can see the backyard and the street. Do you like it? Marcus asked. I love it. But the best part is the backyard. Uncle Ray said I can plant a garden next spring. A real garden like Mom had. Marcus smiled. I brought you something to get started. He handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper. Inside were packets of flower seeds, marigolds and petunias, the same varieties her mother had grown. Izzy clutched the seeds to her chest. tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for everything." But Marcus's involvement in Izzy's life was just beginning. Over the following months, he watched as she flourished in her new environment. Her grades improved dramatically when she no longer had to worry about basic necessities. She made friends at her new school, children who invited her to birthday parties and sleepovers. She joined the school's reading club and discovered a talent for creative writing. Raymond, meanwhile, proved to be an excellent property manager. The regular hours and steady income transformed him from a stressed, overwhelmed guardian into a more confident and patient caregiver. He began attending school events and taking an active interest in Izzy's education. The relationship between uncle and niece evolved from mere survival to genuine affection and mutual support. Marcus established a college fund for Izzy, managed by a trust that would ensure her education was fully funded regardless of circumstances. He also arranged for tutoring and enrichment activities, music lessons and art classes that fed her creative spirit. But he was careful to maintain appropriate boundaries, always working through Raymond and respecting the family structure they had built. The most meaningful moments, however, continued to happen during their Sunday visits to the cemetery. Marcus had Sarah's headstone replaced with a beautiful granite memorial that included a small garden plot where Izzy could plant flowers directly in the ground. He also arranged for perpetual care of the gravesite, ensuring that it would always be maintained with dignity and respect. One Sunday morning in late spring, as they sat beside Sarah's grave surrounded by the marigolds and petunias that Izzy had planted, she asked Marcus a question that surprised him. "Do you think Mom knows about everything that's happened? Do you think she can see how much better things are now?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "I don't know what happens after we die," he said honestly. "But I do know that love doesn't disappear just because someone is gone. Your mother's love for you is still real, still active in the world through the person you're becoming. In that sense, I think she's very much aware of how you're growing and thriving." Izzy nodded thoughtfully. "I feel her sometimes, especially when I'm in the garden. It's like she's right there beside me, happy that I'm remembering what she taught me about making beautiful things grow." "What do you think she would want for your future?" Marcus asked. "I think she'd want me to be happy and to help other people be happy too. She'd want me to use my education to make the world a little bit better." "And how do you plan to do that?" Izzy's eyes lit up with passion. "I still want to be a teacher, but now I want to be the kind of teacher who helps kids like I used to be, kids who don't have much but have big dreams anyway. I want to show them that their circumstances don't define their possibilities." Marcus felt his heart swell with pride and hope. "That sounds like a perfect way to honor your mother's memory." As the months turned into years, Marcus watched Izzy grow into an exceptional young woman. She excelled academically, earning placement in advanced classes and receiving recognition for her creative writing. She volunteered at a local literacy program, helping younger children learn to read. She maintained her Sunday ritual of visiting her mother's grave, but now the conversations she had there were filled with achievements and goals, rather than survival and sadness. On Izzy's 16th birthday, Marcus arranged a special surprise. He had commissioned a scholarship in Sarah Catherine Rodriguez's name to be awarded annually to a student from a low-income family who demonstrated exceptional academic potential and community service. Izzy would serve on the selection committee, helping to identify young people who embodied her mother's values of resilience, kindness, and determination. "This is incredible," Izzy said, reading the scholarship description with tears in her eyes. "Mom's name will help other kids go to college. She's still teaching, even now. The best teachers never stop influencing the world," Marcus said. "They just find new ways to share what they know." That afternoon, as they sat in the garden behind Izzy's house, surrounded by the flowers she had learned to grow in her mother's memory, Marcus reflected on how much his own life had changed since that first Sunday morning in BER. The cemetery. He had always been successful in business, but he had never understood the difference between achievement and fulfillment until he met a barefoot little girl who brought wildflowers to her mother's grave. "Marcus," Izzy said, interrupting his thoughts, "I've been thinking about something." "What's that?" "You've given me so much, opportunities I never could have imagined. but I think maybe I've given you something too." Marcus looked at her with curiosity. "What do you think you've given me?" "A family," she said simply. "You and Uncle Ray and me, we're not related by blood, but we're family anyway. We choose to take care of each other, to believe in each other, to be there when it matters. That's what families do." Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. She was right, of course. In trying to save this child, he had somehow saved himself. He had found purpose beyond profit, meaning beyond accumulation. He had learned that the greatest investments weren't measured in dollars, but in the lives touched and the futures made possible. "You're absolutely right," he said. "Thank you for showing me what family really means." As the sun set over their small garden, Marcus thought about the journey that had brought them all to this moment. It had started with a chance encounter, a lonely billionaire and a grieving child finding solace in each other's company. But it had become something much more profound, a testament to the power of human connection and the possibility of redemption. Years later, when Izzy graduated as valedictorian of her high school class, she chose to give her speech about the flowers her mother had loved. She talked about how some plants grow wild and free, finding strength in unexpected places, while others flourish when given proper care and attention. She compared this to human potential, the way that every child carries within them the seeds of greatness, but some need more nurturing than others to reach their full bloom. "The most beautiful gardens," she said, looking directly at Marcus in the audience, "are the ones where someone takes the time to see the potential in what others might consider weeds, and gives them the chance to grow into something magnificent." As Marcus watched this remarkable young woman accept her diploma and prepare to begin her journey toward becoming the teacher she had always dreamed of being, he thought about the morning 8 years earlier when he had first seen a barefoot child picking flowers in a cemetery. He had been running from his own grief then, using wealth and success as shields against the emotional vulnerability that true connection required. But Izzy had seen through all of that with the clarity that only comes from understanding real loss. She had recognized a kindred spirit in grief and had offered him the most precious gift imaginable, the chance to transform pain into purpose, to turn mourning into meaning. The next morning, Marcus made his usual Sunday run through Riverside Cemetery, but this time he wasn't alone. Izzy ran beside him, her stride confident and strong, her college acceptance letters safely stored at home, but her commitment to her weekly ritual unchanged. They stopped at Sarah's grave, where the memorial garden was in full bloom, a riot of color that would have made any mother proud. "I got into Stanford," Izzy announced to her mother's headstone, placing a fresh bouquet of flowers from their home garden beside the granite memorial. "Full scholarship, just like you always dreamed. I'm going to study education and child psychology, and when I graduate, I'm coming back here to teach kids who need someone to believe in them." Marcus knelt beside her, placing his own small offering of flowers, as had become his tradition. "Sarah," he said quietly, "I want you to know that your daughter has changed my life in ways I'm still discovering. She's taught me that success isn't measured by what you accumulate, but by what you give away. She's shown me that the most important investments are the ones you make in people, not portfolios." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Izzy spoke. "You know what I realized this week?" she said. "When I was little, I thought bringing flowers to Mom's grave was about keeping her memory alive. But now I understand it was really about keeping love alive. The flowers weren't for her, they were for me. A way to practice gratitude and remember that beautiful things can grow, even in difficult places." End quote. Marcus nodded, understanding completely. "Your mother was wise to teach you that lesson so young." "She was wise about a lot of things. But I think the wisest thing she ever did was raise me to believe that every person has value, regardless of their circumstances. That's why you saw something worth investing in when I was just a sad little girl with dirty feet and hand-me-down clothes." "I saw what your mother saw," Marcus said. "Potential, kindness, courage, all the things that really matter." As they prepared to leave the cemetery, Izzy turned back to look at her mother's grave one more time. "I know you're proud of us, Mom," she said softly. We figured out how to be a family, even though none of us expected it to happen this way. The years that followed brought more changes and challenges. Izzy excelled at Stanford, majoring in elementary education with a minor in child development. She spent her summers working at Marcus's foundation, helping to develop programs for at-risk youth and identifying promising students for scholarship opportunities. Raymond continued managing properties for Marcus's company and eventually met and married a wonderful woman who embraced Izzy as her own daughter. Marcus himself underwent his own transformation during these years. He began to shift his business practices, focusing more on sustainable investments and companies that created positive social impact. He established the Rodriguez Foundation in Sarah's memory, dedicated to supporting educational opportunities for children from low-income families. Most importantly, he learned to find balance between his professional responsibilities and his personal relationships, understanding finally that wealth without connection was just another form of poverty. On Izzy's 21st birthday, Marcus presented her with a special gift, a deed to a small house near the elementary school where she would begin her teaching career after graduation. The house came with a large backyard, already prepared for the garden he knew she would want to plant. "I can't accept this," Izzy protested, though her eyes were shining with gratitude. "It's too much." "It's not a gift," Marcus said with a smile. "It's an investment. I'm investing in a teacher who's going to change hundreds of lives over the course of her career. I'm investing in someone who understands that the most important lessons can't be found in textbooks, but in the connections we make with each other. What if I fail? What if I'm not as good a teacher as I want to be?" Marcus thought of the 8-year-old girl who had comforted a grown man's tears in a cemetery, who had faced loss and hardship with grace and wisdom, far beyond her years. "Impossible," he said firmly. "You've been teaching people since you were 8 years old. You taught me how to grieve properly, how to love without expecting anything in return, how to find meaning and service to others. Any child who has you as a teacher will be incredibly fortunate." End quote. The day Izzy graduated from Stanford, Marcus sat in the audience with Raymond and his wife, watching as she received her diploma with highest honors. Her graduation speech, delivered as the student speaker, was about the power of mentorship and the ripple effects of believing in someone's potential. "Every person in this audience has been shaped by someone who saw more in them than they saw in themselves," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the packed auditorium. Teachers, parents, friends, strangers who became family, all of them invested in our futures when the outcomes were uncertain. Today, as we prepare to go out into the world, we carry with us the responsibility to be that person for someone else, to be the voice that says you matter, you have potential, you can achieve more than you ever imagined. End quote. As she spoke, Marcus thought about the chain of influence that had led to this moment. Sarah Rodriguez, a single mother working 2 jobs, had instilled in her daughter values of compassion and resilience that would touch hundreds of lives. Her early death, tragic as it was, had set in motion a series of events that would ultimately create opportunities for countless other children. It was a testament to the mysterious ways that love continues to work in the world, even after the person who embodied it is gone. After the ceremony, as they celebrated at a small restaurant near campus, Izzy raised her glass in a toast. "To Mom," she said, "who taught me that flowers make hard days better, and that the most beautiful things in life often grow in the most unexpected places." "To Sarah," Marcus echoed, "and to the remarkable daughter who carries on her legacy." 6 months later, Izzy began her teaching career at Riverside Elementary School, just a few miles from the cemetery where she and Marcus had first become friends. Her classroom was bright and welcoming, with plants growing on every windowsill and student artwork covering every wall. She quickly gained a reputation as a teacher who saw potential in every child, especially those who might be overlooked by others. Marcus made it a point to visit her classroom regularly, sometimes bringing guest speakers from his various businesses, sometimes just reading to the children during story time. He watched with pride as Izzy worked her magic with students who reminded him of her younger self. Children who came to school hungry or sad or convinced that they weren't smart enough to succeed. One afternoon, as he sat in the back of Izzy's classroom, listening to her read a story about a little seed that grew into a mighty oak tree, Marcus noticed a small girl in the front row. She was thin and pale, with clothes that were clean but clearly too big, and she listened to the story with the intense focus of someone who desperately needed to believe in happy endings. After the children had been dismissed, Marcus approached Izzy about the girl. "Tell me about Emma," he said, nodding toward the child who was slowly packing her backpack. "She's new this year," Izzy said quietly. "Living with her grandmother after her parents died in a car accident. She's incredibly bright, but she's struggling with the transition. She reminds me of someone I used to know." Marcus smiled at the reference. "What does she need?" "The same thing we all needed at her age. Someone to believe in her potential and give her the tools to succeed. Then let's make sure she gets it." As Emma walked past them toward the door, Izzy called out to her. "Emma, wait a minute. I'd like you to meet my friend Mr. Marcus. He comes to visit our class sometimes." Emma looked up at Marcus with solemn eyes that held a familiar sadness. "Hello," she said politely. "It's very nice to meet you, Emma," Marcus said, kneeling down to her level. "Miss Rodriguez tells me you're an excellent student." "I try to be," Emma said. "My grandmother says education is important." "Your grandmother is absolutely right, and I have a feeling you're going to do amazing things with your education." As Emma left the classroom, Marcus felt the familiar stirring of purpose that had become his compass over the years. Here was another child who deserved every opportunity to succeed, another chance to transform potential into achievement. "I know that look," Izzy said, watching him with amusement. "You're already planning ways to help her, aren't you? Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's been on the receiving end of your planning. Just remember what you taught me all those years ago. The best help is the kind that preserves dignity and empowers people to succeed on their own terms." Marcus nodded, remembering the lessons he had learned about the delicate balance between assistance and autonomy. "What would you suggest?" "Start small. Build trust. Show up consistently. Let her know that someone believes in her potential, even when she doesn't believe in it herself." It was advice that could have applied to any relationship, but Marcus recognized it as the wisdom that had guided their own unlikely friendship from the very beginning. Izzy had grown from a grieving child into a gifted teacher, but she still carried within her the profound understanding of what it meant to be seen, valued, and supported. Over the following months, Marcus began visiting Emma's grandmother, Mrs. Chen, a woman in her 70s who was raising her granddaughter on a fixed income. Like Raymond years earlier, she was suspicious of offers of help from wealthy strangers, but gradually came to trust Marcus's genuine desire to support Emma's education. The assistance, when it came, was carefully calibrated to preserve the family's independence while removing barriers to Emma's success. A scholarship to a summer reading program, tutoring services provided through the school district, a computer for homework that happened to be an extra from Marcus's office. Each gift was presented as an opportunity earned rather than charity received. But perhaps the most valuable gift Marcus gave Emma was the same one Izzy had given him years earlier: the knowledge that someone cared about her future and believed in her ability to overcome any obstacle. He attended her school performances, celebrated her academic achievements, and listened with genuine interest as she shared her dreams of becoming a veterinarian. As Emma flourished under this support, Marcus began to understand that his relationship with Izzy had been the beginning of something much larger than either of them had anticipated. What had started as one man's desire to help one child had evolved into a model for creating opportunity and hope in the lives of young people who needed someone to believe in their potential. The Rodriguez Foundation grew to support hundreds of students across the country, each one identified by teachers like Izzy, who understood that potential exists everywhere but opportunity does not. Marcus established mentorship programs that paired successful professionals with promising students, creating networks of support that extended far beyond financial assistance. But the heart of the foundation remained the simple principle that Izzy had taught him in that cemetery years earlier: that every person deserves to be seen, valued, and given the chance to grow into their best possible self. On the 10th anniversary of their first meeting, Marcus and Izzy returned to Sarah's grave for a special ceremony. The memorial garden had grown into something spectacular, with flowering shrubs and perennials that bloomed from spring through fall. The scholarship program in Sarah's name had awarded over 200 students the chance to pursue higher education, and many of them had joined Marcus and Izzy for this anniversary celebration. As the group gathered around the memorial, Izzy spoke about the lessons her mother had taught her, and how those lessons continued to influence every aspect of her life and work. She talked about the power of consistent love, the importance of seeing beauty in difficult circumstances, and the profound impact that one person's belief can have on another person's future. "My mother never got to see me graduate from college or become a teacher," Izzy said, her voice steady but emotional. "But her influence touches every student I teach, every life that this foundation impacts, every moment when someone chooses hope over despair. Love doesn't end when someone dies, it just finds new ways to grow and, quote, spread in the world." Marcus stepped forward to add his own thoughts. 10 years ago, I thought success was measured by the size of my bank account and the power of my business empire. But a wise 8-year-old girl taught me that true success is measured by the lives you touch, the hope you create, and the legacy you leave behind. Sarah Rodriguez, through her daughter, has touched more lives than she could ever have imagined. That's the real meaning of flowers making hard days better. They're a reminder that beauty and growth are always possible, even in the most challenging circumstances. As the ceremony concluded and the group began to disperse, Marcus and Izzy remained beside the grave for a few more minutes of quiet reflection. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the cemetery, and the flowers in Sarah's memorial garden swayed gently in the breeze. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't met that morning?" Izzy asked. Marcus considered the question seriously. "I think you would have found a way to succeed regardless. Your strength and determination were already there. You just needed someone to help remove some of the obstacles." "Maybe. But what about you? Do you think you would have found your way to this kind of meaningful work without me pushing you to see beyond your own success?" It was Marcus's turn to be thoughtful. "Honestly, I don't know. I was so focused on accumulating wealth and power that I had lost sight of why any of it mattered. You reminded me that the real purpose of having resources is to use them in service of something larger than yourself. Mom always said that we're all here to help each other grow. I think she would be amazed to see how much growth has come from her simple lesson about flowers making hard days better." As they walked back toward their cars, Marcus felt a deep sense of gratitude for the unexpected journey that had brought them to this point. What had begun as a chance encounter between a lonely billionaire and a grieving child had evolved into a profound friendship and a shared mission to create opportunities for young people who needed someone to believe in their potential. The work would continue, he knew. There would always be more children like Izzy had been, like Emma was now, bright and capable, but facing circumstances that made success seem impossible. There would always be a need for people willing to invest in potential rather than just profit, to see beauty and possibility where others saw only problems. But Marcus had learned that this kind of work wasn't really about changing the world. It was about changing individual lives, one relationship at a time, one act of faith at a time. It was about understanding that the most important flowers are the ones we plant in each other's hearts, the belief and encouragement that help dreams take root and grow into reality. As he drove home that evening, Marcus thought about the little girl who had offered him a wilted dandelion for his mother's memory, who had taught him that tears are just love, with nowhere to go. She had grown into a remarkable woman who was now planting seeds of hope in the lives of her students, creating gardens of possibility wherever she went. The circle was complete, but it was also just beginning. In classrooms and communities across the country, teachers inspired by Izzy's example were identifying students who needed someone to believe in them. Young people supported by the Rodriguez Foundation were graduating from college and starting their own careers in education, social work, and community service. The ripple effects of one mother's love, expressed through wildflowers and passed on through her daughter's wisdom, continued to spread in ways that no one could have predicted or measured. And every Sunday morning, in cemeteries and gardens around the world, people were placing flowers in memory of those they had loved and lost, carrying forward the simple but profound truth that beauty can grow anywhere, that love never truly dies, and that sometimes the most meaningful connections happen in the most unexpected places. Marcus Blackwood had learned that the greatest fortune isn't counted in dollars, but in the lives touched, the dreams enabled, and the hope shared between one human being and another. It was a lesson that had cost him nothing but had given him everything that truly mattered, a lesson taught by a barefoot little girl who understood that flowers make hard days better and that love, properly tended, never stops growing. 5 years later, on a crisp autumn morning, Marcus received a phone call that would test everything he had learned about family, sacrifice, and the true meaning of wealth. The voice on the other end belonged to Dr. Patricia Williams, the head of pediatric oncology at Children's Memorial Hospital. "Mr. Blackwood, I'm calling about Isabella Rodriguez. She asked me to contact you personally." Marcus felt his world tilt sideways. "What's wrong with Izzy?" "She's been diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia. It's the same type of cancer that took her mother, though we've made significant advances in treatment since then. She's responding well to chemotherapy, but she specifically requested that you be informed immediately." The phone slipped from Marcus's hands, as 23 years of buried terror came rushing back. He was 12 years old again, sitting in a sterile hospital room while doctors explained that his mother's cancer had spread beyond treatment. The smell of antiseptic, the sound of machines beeping, the way his father had crumbled into a chair and never quite stood up straight again. But this was different. This was Izzy, his chosen daughter in all but blood, the young woman who had taught him how to transform grief into purpose. She wasn't going to face this alone. And neither was he. Marcus arrived at the hospital within an hour, finding Izzy in a private room overlooking the hospital's healing garden. She was sitting up in bed, grading papers from her third-grade class, and the fourth line snaking from her arm to a pole beside the bed. Her hair had been cut short in preparation for the chemotherapy, but her eyes still held the same determined spirit he had first encountered in that cemetery 15 years earlier. "You came," she said, setting aside the papers and reaching for his hand. "Did you think I wouldn't?" Marcus asked, settling into the chair beside her bed. "I wasn't sure. I know hospitals are difficult for you because of your mother." Marcus marveled at her consideration, even in the midst of her own crisis. "Izzy, nothing in this world could keep me away from you right now. We're family, remember? Families show up for each other." Over the following weeks, Marcus rearranged his entire life around Izzy's treatment schedule. He moved into a suite at a hotel near the hospital, conducting business meetings from the family lounge when Izzy was sleeping and spending every waking moment by her side when she was awake. Raymond and his wife Linda took turns staying with them, creating a support system that never left Izzy alone with her fear. The chemotherapy was brutal, more aggressive than what Sarah had endured 15 years earlier, but also more precisely targeted. Izzy lost her hair completely within the first month, but she faced each treatment with the same quiet courage she had shown as a child visiting her mother's grave. She continued teaching through video calls when her energy allowed, determined not to abandon her students during the school year. "They need consistency," she explained to Marcus one afternoon as she prepared lesson plans from her hospital bed. "Some of these kids have already lost so much. I won't be another adult who disappears from their lives without explanation." Marcus watched her work and felt simultaneously proud and heartbroken. Here was a woman facing a potentially terminal illness, and her primary concern was still the welfare of the children in her care. It was exactly the kind of selfless dedication her mother would have shown, the legacy of love and service that Sarah had planted in her daughter's heart. During the long hours of treatment, Marcus began to understand aspects of Izzy's character that he had never fully appreciated. She had inherited not just her mother's compassion, but also her fierce determination to find meaning in suffering. When other patients in the oncology ward struggled with despair, Izzy became an informal counselor, sharing her own experiences with loss and resilience. One evening, Marcus found her sitting with a teenage boy whose parents couldn't afford to stay at the hospital during his treatment. The boy, David, was 17 and terrified, convinced that his diagnosis meant the end of all his dreams of attending college and becoming an engineer. "You know what my mom used to tell me when I was scared?" Izzy was saying to David. "She said that courage isn't about not being afraid. Courage is about being afraid and choosing to keep moving forward anyway. Every day you choose to fight this disease, You're being incredibly brave. But what if the back treatment doesn't work? David asked. What if I die before I ever get to do anything important with my life? Izzy was quiet for a moment, and Marcus could see her considering her words carefully. I lost my mom when I was 8, she said finally. For years, I thought her life had been cut short, that she hadn't gotten to do the important things she was meant to do. But I was wrong. The most important thing she ever did was teach me how to love, how to find hope in raw, dark places, how to believe that every person has value. She did that in 26 years, and it's still changing lives 15 years after she died." End quote. You think even if I die, my life could still matter? I think your life already matters. You're 17 years old, and you're fighting one of the hardest battles anyone can face. And you're doing it with dignity and hope. That's not nothing, David. That's everything. That's everything. Marcus listened from the doorway, understanding once again why Izzy had become such an extraordinary teacher. She had the rare ability to see past circumstances to the essential worth of every individual, to find the lesson hidden within every challenge. As Izzy's treatment progressed, Marcus began to notice changes in his own perspective that went far beyond his relationship with her. The experience of sitting in hospital waiting rooms, of watching someone he loved fight for their life, had stripped away the last vestiges of his old priorities. Business deals that had once seemed crucial now felt trivial. Meetings that had once commanded his immediate attention were rescheduled without hesitation. His assistant, Jennifer, finally confronted him about his changed behavior during a brief phone call from the hospital. Marcus, you've missed 3 board meetings this month. The shareholders are starting to ask questions about your commitment to the company. Then maybe it's time they learn that some things are more important than quarterly profits, Marcus replied, watching through the window as Izzy walked slowly around the healing garden with her the 4th pole. This isn't like you. You've never put personal matters ahead of business before. Marcus considered Jennifer's observation, recognizing the truth in it. Maybe that was the problem, he said finally. Maybe I had my priorities backwards for most of my life. The conversation marked a turning point in Marcus's approach to his business empire. He began delegating more responsibility to his executive team, focusing his personal attention on the investments and initiatives that aligned with his values rather than simply maximizing returns. The Rodriguez Foundation expanded significantly during this period as Marcus poured both financial resources and personal energy into creating opportunities for young people facing adversity. Meanwhile, Izzy's medical team reported encouraging progress. The aggressive chemotherapy was working, and her cancer markers were dropping steadily. After 6 months of treatment, she achieved what her oncologist called complete remission, meaning that no cancer cells could be detected in her blood or bone marrow. The day Izzy was declared cancer-free, Marcus organized a celebration in the hospital's family lounge. Raymond and Linda were there, along with several of Izzy's teaching colleagues and a handful of her current and former students. Even Emma, now in high school and preparing for college, came to share in the joyous occasion. "I want to say something," Izzy announced as the small group gathered around a cake decorated with flowers made of frosting. "This experience has taught me something important about the nature of miracles. I used to think miracles were about God, changing the laws of nature to help people. But now I think miracles are about people changing their own nature to help each other." She looked around the room at the faces of everyone who had supported her through the darkest months of her life. "Every person in this room performed miracles during my treatment. Marcus rearranged his entire life to be here. Raymond and Linda took leave from work to care for me. Students sent cards and videos every week to remind me that I had reasons to keep fighting. My colleagues covered my classes and made sure my students never felt abandoned." Her voice grew stronger as she continued. "The real miracle isn't that the medicine worked to cure my cancer. The real miracle is that love worked to cure my despair. The real miracle is that we chose to show up for each other when showing up was difficult and expensive and inconvenient." Marcus felt tears streaming down his face as he listened to her words. Once again, Izzy had found a way to transform personal suffering into universal wisdom, to extract meaning from pain and share it in a way that elevated everyone around her. As the celebration wound down and people began to leave, Marcus found himself alone with Izzy in the family lounge. She was tired from the excitement, but radiant with relief and gratitude. "Thank you," she said simply. "For everything. For being here. For believing I would survive this. For never letting me face it alone." "You don't need to thank me," Marcus replied. "You would have done the same for me." "Yes, I would have. That's what family does." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun set over the city through the lounge's large windows. Finally, Izzy spoke again. "I've been thinking about what I want to do now that I'm in remission. The doctors say I should be able to return to teaching full-time in the fall, but I'm wondering if there might be other ways to make a difference." "What are you thinking?" "I want to start a program for children who are dealing with serious illness in their families. Kids like I was when Mom was sick. Kids who are trying to be brave and take care of everyone else, while their world falls apart. I want to create a space where they can just be children, where they can express their fears and sadness, without feeling like they're adding to their family's burden." Marcus felt his heart swell with pride and excitement. "That sounds like an incredible program. What would you need to make it happen?" "Space, funding, trained counselors who understand childhood grief and trauma, and partnerships with hospitals and schools to identify the kids who need help but might not ask for it." "Consider it done," Marcus said immediately. Izzy laughed. "Don't you want to see a business plan first? A budget? Some kind of feasibility study?" "Izzy, you've been conducting a feasibility study your entire life. You've been testing the theory that love and support can help children overcome impossible circumstances, and the results speak for themselves. If you think this program is needed, then it's needed." 6 months later, the Sarah Rodriguez Center for Family Support opened its doors in a renovated building just blocks from the hospital where Izzy had received her treatment. The center offered counseling services, support groups, educational assistance, and recreational activities for children and teenagers dealing with serious illness in their families. Izzy served as the center's director, bringing to the role not only her education and teaching experience, but also her lived understanding of what these children were experiencing. She hired counselors who had personal experience with family illness and loss, creating a staff that could offer both professional expertise and authentic empathy. The center's signature program was something Izzy called garden therapy, where children could plant and tend small gardens while processing their emotions about their family situations. The therapeutic garden behind the center bloomed with flowers chosen by the children themselves, each plant representing hope and healing in the face of uncertainty. Marcus visited the center regularly, often finding excuses to stop by and observe the programs in action. He watched children who had been silent and withdrawn gradually open up as they worked in the dashen garden or participated in art therapy sessions. He saw teenagers who had been angry and resentful find healthy ways to express their frustration and fear. One afternoon, he found Izzy sitting in the garden with a little girl who couldn't have been more than 6 years old. The child was carefully watering a small pot of marigold seedlings while talking about her daddy, who was in the hospital with something called cancer. "My mommy cries a lot," the little girl was saying. "She tries to hide it, but I can see her eyes are red. I want to make her feel better, but I don't know how." "Sometimes when people we love are sick, we feel helpless," Izzy said gently. "We want to fix everything, but we can't." "Do you know what you can do, though?" The little girl shook her head. "You can love her exactly as much as you always have. You can give her hugs when she needs them. And you can take good care of yourself, so she doesn't have to worry about you too." "Will that really help?" "It will help more than you know. Love is the most powerful medicine there is, and you have so much love to give." Marcus felt his throat tighten as he listened to this conversation. The little girl reminded him painfully of Izzy at the same age, trying to make sense of illness and loss, while carrying emotional burdens far too heavy for her small shoulders. But now there was this place, this sanctuary, where children could receive the support and understanding that Izzy had been forced to find on her own. As the months passed, the Sarah Rodriguez Center gained recognition throughout the medical community for its innovative approach to supporting families dealing with serious illness. Other hospitals began reaching out to Izzy for consultation on developing similar programs. and medical schools started incorporating her methodologies into their training curricula. The success of the center attracted the attention of national media, and Izzy found herself being interviewed for magazine articles and television programs about innovative approaches to healthcare. She always deflected personal praise, focusing instead on the children and families the center served and the importance of addressing the emotional needs of all family members during medical crises. During one particularly prominent interview, the journalist asked Izzy about the inspiration for her work. "I think it started when I was 8 years old, sitting in a cemetery with a bouquet of wildflowers," Izzy said. "I was trying to find a way to stay connected to my mother after she died, and I discovered that sometimes the most healing thing you can do is create something beautiful in memory of what you've lost. And now you're helping other children create their own forms of healing? I'm helping them understand that they're not alone, that their feelings are valid, and that love doesn't end just because circumstances change. Whether we're dealing with illness, death, or any other kind of loss, we all need to know that someone sees us, believes in us, and will stand with us through the difficult times." The interview aired on a Sunday evening, and by Monday morning, the center had received over 300 calls from families asking for help and professionals wanting to volunteer their services. Marcus hired additional staff to handle the increased demand and began exploring the possibility of opening satellite locations in other cities. But perhaps the most meaningful response came from an unexpected source. A week after the interview aired, Marcus received a call from his own father, whom he hadn't spoken to in over 5 years. "I saw the interview with that young woman you've been helping," his father said, his voice rough with emotion. "She talked about losing her mother when she was 8. Yes, that's Izzy. She's become like a daughter to me. Marcus, I need to tell you something. I failed you after your mother died. I was so lost in my own grief that I couldn't see how much you were hurting too. I should have been there for you, the way you've been there for her." Marcus felt old wounds reopening, but instead of the familiar anger, he felt something closer to compassion. "Dad, we were both grieving. We both did the best we could with what we had. No, son. You are 12 years old. You deserve better from me." The conversation led to the first honest discussion Marcus had ever had with his father about his mother's death and its aftermath. They talked about the years of silence and distance, the way grief had driven them apart instead of bringing them together. They talked about regrets and missed opportunities, but also about the possibility of building a different relationship going forward. A month later, Marcus's father visited the Sarah Rodriguez Center, where he met Izzy and observed the programs she had created. Afterward, he asked Marcus if there was a way he could contribute to the center's work. "I spent 30 years avoiding dealing with loss and grief," he said. "Maybe it's time I learned how to do it properly." Marcus's father became a regular volunteer at the center, working with fathers and grandfathers who were struggling to support their families through medical crises. His presence added a valuable perspective to the center's programming, demonstrating that healing and growth are possible at any age. The success of the center and the renewed relationship with his father marked the beginning of what Marcus would later recognize as the most fulfilling period of his life. He'd finally found the balance between professional success and personal meaning that had eluded him for so many years. As Izzy's health remained stable and her work at the center continued to expand, Marcus began to think about his own legacy in new ways. He had accumulated vast wealth, but now he understood that wealth was only valuable insofar as it could be used to create positive change in the world. He began divesting from investments that didn't align with his values and redirecting his resources toward initiatives that promoted education, healthcare, and family support. The transformation wasn't always easy. Some of his business associates questioned his new priorities, and there were financial costs associated with his ethical stance on certain investments. But Marcus found that the more he aligned his professional life with his personal values, the more satisfaction he derived from his work. On the 5-year anniversary of the Sarah Rodriguez Center's opening, Marcus and Izzy stood together in the therapeutic garden, surrounded by hundreds of flowers planted by children and families who had found healing purpose within its walls. The garden had grown into something spectacular, a living testament to the power of hope and the resilience of the human spirit. Do you think your mother would be proud of what you've built here? Marcus asked. Izzy smiled, touching the petals of a nearby rose bush that had been planted by one of their first families. I think she'd be amazed. When she taught me that flowers make hard days better, I don't think she imagined it would lead to all this. I think she knew exactly what she was teaching you, Marcus said. She was giving you the tools to transform pain into purpose, to find beauty in difficult places, to create healing wherever you went. As they stood together in the garden, watching children and families move through the center's programs, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. It had begun with a chance encounter in a cemetery. Two people bound together by loss and loneliness, finding solace in each other's company. But it had become something much larger, a testament to the transformative power of love, the importance of showing up for each other, and the profound impact that one person's belief can have on another person's life. The ripple effects continued to spread, touching lives in ways neither of them could have predicted or measured. Marcus knew that his story with Izzy was far from over. There would be new challenges, new opportunities to serve, new lives to touch and transform. But he also knew that whatever came next, they would face it together, with the unshakable foundation of love and mutual support that had sustained them through everything they had already overcome. The flowers in the garden swayed gently in the evening breeze, each bloom a reminder that beauty and growth are always possible, even in the most challenging circumstances. It was a lesson that would continue to guide them both, wherever their paths might lead.